Okay, that's it, right? Isn't it? Well, I'm not sure if this is working or not. I do not know. Um, I'm trying to find this on my other PC. Um, my other laptop, because I can't really tell. Huh. Yeah. All right, I already did that. Why is this not working? Oh, never mind. Sorry, folks, I can't really tell. It tells me I'm live, but I don't see it on my other laptop here. Now I have to sign in again. This is ridiculous. Ugh. All right, just go to where I want to go, you silly thing. Nope. Oh, maybe I am actually live and I'm being an idiot here. Okay. I see it. I kind of see it now. Wow. This is crazy. Okay. Hello, everybody. I thought that I would start to do a series about actually making null binding things, and I would work on projects from start to finish, because people just get little bits and then they of how to start the null binding thing, and how to add a stitch. But I thought if you just work actually making something, you can oh, you can grab a ball of yarn and a needle, and you can just work along with me and follow the series as we go through it. And at the end of watching the series, you might actually have made something like a product or a hat or something. I thought I'd try a hat, and then maybe some mittens and some all sorts of different things that you can do with this. It helps if I have all the tools with me when I start. Sorry, I'm being an idiot. you're going to do Nalbinding, you need needles. So I'm just starting to add, I'm adding a new piece of yarn onto here, and I use Russian join technique. And in some of the comments in the earlier video, somebody was asking, well, do I spit on it and do to splice it and spit it? That's actually a different method that people use. So you pull this apart and you put these two together, and then you spit on it like this. And it's better to actually use your saliva rather than water, because the enzymes from your saliva help the wool to felt. So you can spin it like that and spit on it some more and join it. But I don't really like that method because sometimes it falls apart. And I'm using hand spun, and I like to use the Russian join technique because I just find it much easier and it works well. So this is the way I do it. So I take a regular darning needle. You can use a Nalbinding needle if it's not too fat, because the fat ones won't really go through the yarn, and I thread that through about 4 or 5 times. And then I put a loop in this end of the needle. And then before I pull this through, I attach the end of the new yarn through there. And I pull this through. So now that piece of yarn has interconnected in there, and it's not going to come out of there. And then this one, you do the same thing on this side. If you try and make this, if you pull this through the right length, you don't have a dangly piece that you cut off, which can make it look a stubby thing, but this just kind of puts it right in there, and it's not going to show up. It's going to be a little bit thicker than the rest of the yarn, but in this case I'm working with hand spun. It's always a little bit thick and thin anyway, so once a hat is made, you aren't really going to be able to tell. It's a bit more noticeable when you use applied yarn. There. When I Nalbind, I pull off about 3 or 4 arm lengths at a time, because it's faster to do it that way. And then I accordion fold it to make this length that you pull through shorter, and that's why it's nice to have to work with a needle that has got a big eye, so it fits more yarn into it. As you're Nalbinding, if you don't do this, then and you pull up a long length, you're pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling just to do one stitch, and that's where a lot of the time wasting happens when you're doing Nalbinding. But if you accordion fold it, then you've shortened this length that you have to pull through. Yeah, okay. So with Nalbinding, you work opposite. It's like crochet. You're working from one end to the other, but you work in the opposite direction. I'm going left to right, and then crochet you do right to left. And I'm doing the Nalbind or the Finnish 1+2 stitch. So I'm picking up. There's the last one. So I'm picking up the next loop there, and then I have 2 loops on my thumb. I pull the last one off my thumb, there, and then I pick up another loop from in behind that you formed previously, and you turn the needle and you pull it through there. So this forms a new loop, and now that's the old loop. And then the next stitch, you pick up the following one from the row, bottom row, and you go pull off that one, the old stitch off the thumb, that loop that's behind your thumb, and then you come back. No, don't get this twisted. What have I done? As I'm making this hat, I'm going to be writing out instructions on what I've done and how many stitches and stuff, and I'm going to write up the patterns, and I'm going to put the patterns up for sale on my Patreon account. I think it's $3 to download a pattern, so that you can access them that way. just going to check this stream for a second. I'll be right back. Okay. Well, that row went quickly. I think I've got about 80 something stitches on this hat, and I start from the bottom because then I know that I'm going to make it to a certain size. If I do it from the top, I'm never quite sure how the sizing works out. So I use that hat form, or I measure it against my head, or I just use a tape measure to get the right circumference for the bottom part of the hat, and then I just put on stitches. I always put on extra stitches because the first half a dozen stitches that you form are never really a full stitch, because Nalbinding is interconnected loops that go round and round and round, and you don't actually get the full interconnection for about 5 or 6 loops. So this stuff in the beginning is always going to look terrible, and at the end of the hat I can just unpick this part, or sometimes I just turn it around and make it into a little rosette or something as a decoration on the hat, like that. So it doesn't hurt to leave a little bit extra and make a little flower out of it. And I just kind of keep going on. I don't look back to see if I've made a mistake, because once you've formed this, it's not going to come apart. Nobody's really going to be able to tell, because wool felts, and when you use it, and it's just going to all blend in very nicely, and nobody's really going to be able to know if you have a stitch out or not. And the hand spun is slightly lumpy, so it just adds to the texture of the hat. I spun this wool in a center pull ball way, like sort of like the Noro yarns are spun, so the colors change from one shade to another. So in the middle it's going to be purple. It starts with the blues and greens and oranges, and then it goes to the purples. So it's going to give a nice shading on the hat, I think, in the end. And I think I'm going to be selling some of my hand spun yarns as yarn kits, so you can buy the pattern and the yarns for that and to make a hat. I'm planning on putting these into, oh wait a minute, what am I doing? Not ready to do that. I gotta attach this first. Right, so Once again, I use the Russian join to join this yarn. So I run this through about 4 or 5 times. Thread through the other end on the needle, and I pull this through there. And trim this off. And rethread the Nalbinding needle. So I pick up the first stitch, pick one off the thumb and one behind, and I come through. How did I get a knot in there? That is a knot. Or is that a twist? No, I think that's a knot. Yep, that's a knot. I'll pull it out. How that happened, I do not know. Oh, that's better. The more that I do Nalbinding, I think I prefer it a lot more than knitting. I've knitted all my life ever since I was probably about 6 years old. I just find it so portable to do and so forgiving that, you know, if you make a bit of a mistake, it doesn't matter because it's just going to turn out good in the end. And you're interconnecting the loops, and so that it's not going to unravel because you're going through and forming the loop, and then you're going you're going through the top of this previous loop, and then you're going in there, and then you're going there, picking up the top of that previous loop, coming back through, and now you're going back to the bottom of this loop. So they all intertwine and interconnect. So now I'm coming around. Now I'm coming around the bottom again. Now I'm going through the top of this one. I'm picking up that previous loop. I'm twisting it, coming back through here, and coming back like that. I think there's a big misconception about when Nalbinding was done, Nalbinding, because in some countries, such as the UK, they found one sock from a grave several hundred years ago. So therefore, Nalbinding was only done several hundred years ago. But because it's done with wool, and wool doesn't last and doesn't survive, that people think, well, it wasn't. Nobody else did it after that, but my dad told me stories about how his mom used to do Nalbinding. He called it he called it beukalokude, knitting with your thumb. And he said his mom used to make him everything with the thumb knitting. And he told me to learn how to use it. Päivi, you have to learn how to do this, because he says it's way better than other knitting. So someday you learn how to do this because it's way better than anything. And so, okay, so that's why I started to do this. Once I figured out, oh, that's what he's talking about. This is what he was talking about. Well, so this was back in early 1900s. If you listen to some of my dad's tapes and the Sami tales that I've done recently, you kind of get an idea of what conditions were like back then. And my grandmother lived in a little turf hut in the very, very north of Finland, which is now part of Russia. And in the wintertime, they would get snowed in, and there would be no light. I think they had light from a little seal oil lamp. And my dad gave explanations in one of the tapes about how they prepared the seal oil for this lamp. And she would work there, and she would do reindeer leather stitching and Nalbinding work, and making things for the other Norwegian Sami people, and she would take them over to Norway in the summer to sell. And she worked in this little hut with just this little seal oil lamp, very poor conditions. and yet she was able to do work like this and to stitch reindeer leather and and oops, one and clothing. And I just marvel at the primitive conditions that people lived through, and they're still able to make beautiful things. And so that wasn't all that long ago. It wasn't back in the Middle Ages. It was, I suppose, maybe 100 years ago now. Okay. I have done another row, and I'm going to take a break, and I might be back a bit later today. I'm not sure. I think I've got to figure out the best time of day to be doing these streams. So thank you for watching.